First contact fitness. Are you absolutely certain these credentials are accurate? Administrator Voxthal asked, his 8 eyes blinking in asynchronous patterns of disbelief as he reviewed the holographic display. The gelatinous membranes that served as his eyebrows quivered with each blink. Yes, Administrator. I triple-checked them myself, replied his assistant, a slender proxian with translucent skin that revealed the rhythmic pulsing of her 3 hearts. But this says she's from Earth. The administrator pronounced the word with visible discomfort, as though merely saying it might summon some malevolent force. A Class 13 Deathworld. The assistant confirmed. The first human to be certified as a galactic fitness instructor. Voxthal's gray skin took on a paler hue. The Committee for Interspecies Integration must be trying to make some kind of statement. Well, we'll accommodate them, but keep the emergency medical team on standby. I don't want any incidents. 3 corridors away, Kira Donovan adjusted the collar of her new instructor uniform. The material was far more comfortable than anything she'd worn during her years in Earth's military, but it felt strange against her skin, designed for bodies with different sensitivities and thermal requirements. The door before her bore the insignia of the Galactic Fitness Academy, one of the most prestigious physical education institutions in the Orion arm of the galaxy. Beneath it, a small holographic banner pulsed with the words, "All species, one standard." Kira took a deep breath. Here goes nothing, she muttered to herself, pressing her palm against the entry panel. The credentials embedded in her skin's subdermal chip communicated with the system, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. The gymnasium beyond was unlike anything on Earth. The floor appeared to be made of some kind of responsive gel that adjusted its density with each step. The walls were lined with exercise equipment that defied her understanding. Contraptions of energy fields, anti-gravity pods, and devices that seemed to manipulate matter itself. And then there were the students, 26 beings from across the galaxy, each more alien than the last. Some floated, some crawled, some shifted form as they moved. All of them froze when Kira entered. "Attention, class." Administrator Voxthal's voice resonated through the room. "Today we welcome our newest instructor, Specialist Kira Donovan from Earth. She will be taking over adaptive physical conditioning for the remainder of the academic cycle." The silence that followed was deafening. Kira could feel their eyes, and other sensory organs, fixed on her. She'd been warned about this. Humans were a relative newcomer to the galactic community, and most species had only encountered them through sensationalist media coverage that portrayed Earth as a nightmarish hellscape where only the most brutal life forms could survive. "Thank you, Administrator," Kira said, stepping forward. "It's an honor to be here." A tentative appendage raised from the back of the room. It belonged to a creature that resembled a collection of crystalline rods bound together by pulsing blue energy. "Yes, Zintera," Voxthal acknowledged. "With respect, Administrator," the crystal being's voice chimed like wind through glass. "Is it safe? The gravity setting in this facility is at galactic standard. Won't the human be crushed?" Kira suppressed a smile. Galactic standard gravity was roughly 0.7 of Earth's gravity. To her, it felt like she could leap 10 feet in the air with minimal effort. "I appreciate your concern," Kira responded before the administrator could. "But humans evolved on a world with higher gravity than this. If anything, I need to be careful not to jump too high and hit the ceiling." This elicited a wave of murmurs and the equivalent of gasps from various breathing apparatuses around the room. "Perhaps a demonstration would ease concerns," Voxthal suggested, though Kira could tell he was equally unsure about her capabilities. "Gladly," Kira replied, removing her outer uniform jacket to reveal the standard-issue athletic wear beneath. Several students recoiled at the sight of her bare arms, the visible muscle definition apparently alarming to species whose bodies were predominantly supported by hydrostatic pressure or exoskeletons. Kira approached what appeared to be a strength assessment station. A hovering orb of energy pulsed above a platform. The resistance sphere, Voxful explained. It generates an opposing force based on the user's push. Our advanced students can typically achieve a rating 3. Kira nodded, positioned herself beneath the sphere, and pressed upward. The sphere glowed brighter as it pushed back against her hands. A holographic display nearby flickered rapidly, numbers climbing until they stabilized. Rating 8.7, the system announced. The gymnasium fell silent again, this time with a different quality to the silence. It wasn't fear anymore. It was awe. "Impossible," whispered a serpentine creature near the front, its scales shifting color from green to white. "The calibration must be incorrect." "I assure you, the equipment is functioning normally," Voxthal said, his own disbelief evident in his voice. "Specialist Donovan, perhaps you could explain." Kira lowered her arms and turned to the class. "On Earth, we have a saying, 'What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.' Our world has higher gravity, yes, but also higher atmospheric pressure, more extreme temperature variations, and higher levels of solar radiation than most habitable worlds. Our bodies adapted over millions of years to not just survive these conditions, but thrive in them." She gestured to her form. "This body evolved to run for hours without stopping, to lift many times its own weight, to withstand impacts that would shatter most exoskeletons. But that's not because we're special. It's just adaptation." A small, floating creature with multiple eyes approached cautiously. "But doesn't it hurt to be so dense?" Kira laughed, a sound that made several students flinch. "Not at all. This is simply normal for us, just as your bodies are normal for you. And that's what I'm here to teach, how to optimize your unique physiologies for strength, endurance, and health." She glanced around the room, noting the mixture of fear, curiosity, and skepticism. "In fact, there are things each of you can do that would be impossible for me. The Andorans can regenerate limbs." She nodded to a multi-armed being near the back. "The Vostig can alter their molecular density." This to a cloudy figure that seemed to shift between gas and solid. "The Zith can perceive and manipulate bioelectric fields." A nod to a creature with what appeared to be lightning dancing across its skin. "Physical fitness isn't about becoming like someone else. It's about becoming the best version of yourself. That's what we'll work on together." The tension in the room noticeably decreased, though wariness remained. Kira decided it was time to begin. "Let's start with some basic movement assessments so I can understand your capabilities. Form a circle, please." The students hesitantly arranged themselves in a rough approximation of a circle, some floating above others who remained grounded. "We'll begin with a simple stretching routine that can be adapted for all body types," Kira explained, demonstrating a basic reach toward the ceiling. As she stretched, her muscles visibly flexed beneath her skin. The class watched in fascinated horror as her humanoid form displayed its full range of motion, joints bending, tendons stretching, muscles contracting. To most of them, such exposed mechanical operations without protective casings or exoskeletons seemed both vulnerable and terrifying. "Now you try," Kira encouraged. "Extend your primary appendages to their comfortable limit. Don't strain." The students began to mimic her movements, each in their own way. Some extended tentacles, others elongated crystalline structures, while floating species altered their gas distribution. Kira moved around the circle, offering gentle corrections and encouragement. When she reached a trembling arachnoid student, she noticed it struggling to maintain balance on its rear legs while lifting its frontal appendages. "May I?" Kira asked, gesturing toward the student's lower limbs. The arachnoid, Klevik according to Kira's roster, hesitated but nodded consent. Carefully, Kira placed her hands beneath the student's rear appendages, providing support. The touch caused Klevik to freeze momentarily. "It's all right," Kira assured. "I'm just helping with balance." "Try again." Klevik extended its frontal limbs again, this time achieving the full stretch without wobbling. "Excellent," Kira said, removing her hands once Klevik was stable. "You see, Sometimes we just need a little support to find our strength. The arachnoid's mandibles clicked in what Kira's translator rendered as pleased surprise. Your hands, they're warm and strong. Human normal body temperature is approximately 310 Kelvin, Kira explained, and our skin contains numerous touch receptors, making physical contact an important part of our communication and educational methods. This revelation sent another ripple of murmurs through the class. The idea that physical contact could be educational rather than threatening was novel to many species who primarily communicated through chemical signals, electromagnetic pulses, or color changes. By the end of the first hour, the class had progressed through basic movement assessments, and Kira had compiled a mental catalog of each student's abilities and limitations. Some could manipulate their molecular structure, but struggled with maintaining consistent form. Others possessed tremendous strength in certain appendages, but lacked overall coordination. As the session concluded, Kira noticed Administrator Voxthal watching from the entrance, his 8 eyes unblinking, a sign of intense focus among his species. You've all done wonderfully for our first session, Kira addressed the class. Next time, we'll begin personalized training programs based on what I've observed today. As the students dispersed, their conversations buzzed with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. The human instructor was not what they had expected, both more physically intimidating and more approachable than they had feared. Specialist Donovan, Voxthal approached as the last student exited. That was illuminating. Kira nodded. Thank you, Administrator. They're a promising group. Indeed. Voxthal paused, his feeding tendrils twisting in what Kira had learned was a sign of contemplation. I must admit, when the committee assigned a human instructor, I had reservations. Understandable. Kira replied diplomatically. We're still newcomers, and Earth's reputation precedes us. Yes, well, Voxthal's skin rippled slightly. It seems that reputation may have some basis in fact. Your demonstration on the resistance sphere, it exceeds the capabilities of most of our instructors, not just the students. Kira shrugged, a gesture that made Voxthal's eye membranes flutter in alarm at the sudden movement of her shoulder joints. As I told the class, it's just adaptation. On Earth, that would be an average performance for someone with my training. Voxthal's feeding tendrils went completely still, the equivalent of a jaw dropping in shock. Average. There are more like you. Billions, Kira confirmed. Though we come in many variations of strength, size, and ability, just like any species. The administrator seemed to process this information with difficulty. I see. Well, the emergency medical team was thankfully not needed today. Perhaps we can reduce their standby status for your future classes. Kira smiled, careful not to show too many teeth, which she knew could trigger fear responses in some species. I'd appreciate that. I promise, Administrator, my goal is to help these students, not frighten them. As Voxthal departed with a formal bow, Kira returned to the center of the now empty gymnasium. She bounced lightly on her toes, still reveling in the reduced gravity that made her feel like she could fly. There would be challenges ahead, cultural differences to navigate, fears to allay, and trust to build. But today had been a start. The students had seen that a human could be more than just a terrifying Deathworlder. She could be a teacher, a guide, perhaps even eventually a friend. Kira launched herself into a backflip, something she could never have done so easily on Earth, and landed perfectly on her feet. Yes, this assignment was going to be interesting indeed. Breaking biological barriers. 3 weeks into her tenure at the Galactic Fitness Academy, Kira Donovan had established a routine. Each morning, she would complete her own workout in the empty gymnasium before classes began, a regimen that would have been considered intensive even by military standards back on Earth. In the lighter gravity of the station, she compensated by wearing weighted clothing that the station's fabricators had custom-made to her specifications. The first-time maintenance director, Flea Pond, had seen her running laps with the weighted vest. The methane-breathing engineer had nearly expelled his respiratory gases in shock. You, willingly, make things harder. He had wheezed through his translator. The concept seemingly incomprehensible. It's called progressive overload, Kira had explained. The body adapts to stress by becoming stronger. Without sufficient challenge, we don't improve. This philosophy had become the foundation of her teaching approach, adapted carefully for each species' unique biology. And surprisingly, it was working. This morning, Kira finished her routine and watched as her first class filed into the gymnasium. No longer did they cluster at the far end of the room or flinch when she approached. Progress. Good morning, everyone, Kira greeted the class. Today we'll be working on adaptive response training, teaching your bodies to react appropriately to unexpected stimuli. Vandril, a hovering cloud-like Vostok student, pulsed with blue light, their species equivalent of raising a hand. Instructor Donovan, is this similar to the reflex drills you mentioned last session? Exactly right. Sandril, Kira confirmed. But instead of focusing on neural response time, we'll be working on whole-body coordination during unexpected situations. Klevik, the arachnoid student who had initially been so hesitant, clicked his mandibles excitedly. In just 3 weeks, he had progressed from barely being able to balance on his rear limbs to performing complex movement patterns across all 8 appendages, like the emergency drills the safety department runs. Asked Milan, a serpentine slith whose scales shifted from green to orange with interest. Similar concept, but focused on physical response rather than procedural, Kira explained. On Earth, we have a saying. It's not about how hard you can hit, but how well you can take a hit and keep moving forward. Several translation devices around the room chirped in confusion, struggling to convey the concept in various native languages. Let me demonstrate, Kira said. She approached a training dummy designed to simulate various physical challenges. Computer, activate randomized response program. Level 3. The dummy suddenly animated, swinging one of its appendages toward Kira's midsection. Without hesitation, she sidestepped, caught the appendage, and used its momentum to flip over it, landing gracefully on the other side. The class emitted various sounds of amazement. The key isn't strength, Kira explained as the dummy reset. It's awareness, anticipation, and adaptation. Your bodies already know how to protect themselves. We're just improving the software, so to speak. For the next hour, Kira guided each student through personalized versions of the exercise. The crystalline Synterra learned to redistribute her internal energy to reinforce vulnerable junctions. The gelatinous Morphians practiced rapid density alterations to absorb impacts. The multi-limbed Andorans worked on coordinated evasive movements. As the class progressed, Kira noticed Administrator Voxthal observing from the doorway, accompanied by a being she didn't recognize, tall with iridescent skin and a formal uniform bearing insignia she couldn't interpret. When the students were engaged in paired practice, Voxthal approached with his companion. Specialist Donovan, Voxthal greeted, "May I introduce General Zarkesh of the Galactic Security Council. He's here to observe your unconventional methods." Kira straightened, recognizing the political significance of such a visit. The Security Council oversaw not just peacekeeping, but also the integration of new species into the galactic community. "General," she acknowledged with a respectful nod. "Welcome to our class." Zarkesh's iridescent skin rippled with patterns that Kira's translator couldn't interpret. When he spoke, his voice had a metallic quality that suggested cybernetic enhancement. Specialist Donovan, the general's eyes, milky white with no discernible pupils, scanned her form critically. "Your work here has become something of a discussion point among the council. Some find it concerning that we are teaching supposedly peaceful species combat techniques." Kira maintained her composure, though she felt a flash of annoyance. "With respect, General, we're not teaching combat. We're teaching body awareness, coordination, and adaptive response, skills that translate to emergency situations, workplace safety, and general health." Zarkesh made a sound that might have been skepticism. Yet I observe your students practicing maneuvers remarkably similar to those in the Council's defense training programs. Before Kira could respond, a loud alarm blared throughout the gymnasium. Red lights began to flash along the walls. Emergency alert. Artificial gravity system malfunction. Prepare for fluctuations. This is not a drill, announced the station's AI in multiple languages. Kira immediately turned to her class. Everyone, safety positions now. Remember your species-specific protocols. The students, drilled for this possibility, began moving toward stabilization points around the gymnasium. The serpentine slith coiled around support pillars, the floating Vostig condensed into tighter forms, the crystalline beings interlocked with specially designed anchor points. Administrator, Kira addressed Voxthal, who was already beginning to float as the gravity decreased. What's the situation? Voxthal's feeding tendrils waved in distress. Unknown malfunction. Engineering reports. His words were cut short as the gravity abruptly failed completely, sending both him and General Zarkesh floating upward. Neither had secured themselves in time. Kira, her military training kicking in, pushed off the floor with precise force, calculating her trajectory to intercept the administrator first. She caught him by one of his primary limbs and used her body's rotation to direct them both toward a stabilization bar on the wall. Hold here, she instructed, securing his limb to the bar with a quick movement. Then, spotting General Zarkesh drifting toward a ceiling-mounted air circulation fan, she launched herself again. The general's iridescent skin was flashing rapid patterns that Kira interpreted as alarm. As she reached him, she wrapped one arm around his torso and used her free hand to catch a hanging training rope, stopping their momentum just before they would have hit the fan. "I've got you, sir," she assured him, feeling his body trembling through his formal uniform. Many species from lower gravity worlds had never experienced true zero-G and found it profoundly disorienting. Around the gymnasium, Kira's students were implementing their training, securing themselves, and helping those who had been caught unprepared. Klevik, the arachnoid, had extended his web-spinning abilities to create anchor lines for several classmates. Zentera was using her crystalline structure to create stable handholds on an otherwise smooth wall. Then, as suddenly as it had failed, the gravity returned, not gradually, but at full force. Those who weren't secured found themselves plummeting. Kira, still holding General Zarkesh, absorbed the impact as they fell, positioning her body to take the brunt of the landing while cradling the general. Her reinforced bone structure, developed on Earth's higher gravity, absorbed the shock that might have shattered the bones of many other species. "Are you all right, sir?" Kira asked, helping the stunned general to his feet. Zarkesh stared at her, his milky eyes wide. You could have secured yourself first. Protocol dictates self-preservation as the primary directive in emergencies. Kira shook her head. "Not where I'm from. On Earth, we're taught to protect others first, especially when we have the capability to do so." The general's skin rippled with new patterns. "Fascinating. Your species evolved on a death world, yet developed altruistic emergency responses rather than competitive ones. Cooperation is often a better survival strategy than competition," Kira replied, already scanning the room to assess her students' conditions. To her relief, most had managed the gravity restoration well, using the techniques she taught them to absorb or redirect the sudden force. Administrator Voxthal approached, his movements shaky but composed. "Engineering reports the malfunction is contained. It affected only this section of the station." His 8 eyes focused on Kira with an intensity she hadn't seen before. "Your response was unprecedented, Specialist Donovan. You moved with purpose while the rest of us were still processing what was happening. Emergency response is part of standard human education," Kira explained, downplaying her actions, "and my military training emphasized rapid assessment and action." General Zarkesh had been silent, observing the aftermath of the incident. Now he spoke, his metallic voice carrying across the gymnasium. Your students performed admirably as well. Not a single injury, despite a complete gravity failure and restoration. In similar incidents at other facilities, we typically see a 30% casualty rate. Kira looked at her class with pride. They've been working hard on their adaptive response training. Today they got to apply it in a real situation. The general's iridescent skin settled into a steady blue glow, a sign of deep thought, according to Kira's cultural briefings. Indeed, and you, Specialist Donovan, demonstrated what I believe humans call putting your money where your mouth is. You didn't just teach emergency response, you embodied it. Kira helped a young Morphean student who was struggling to re-solidify after the stress of the gravity shift. It's what any human would do, she said simply. But Zarkesh wasn't finished. I think not, Specialist. According to our studies, your physical capabilities are exceptional even by human standards. Your personnel file indicates you served in an elite military unit on Earth. You're not representative of your species' average. Kira met the general's milky gaze steadily. My physical abilities might be above average, sir, but not my instincts. Humans as a species tend to run toward danger, not away from it. It's one of our defining traits. A trait that emerged from evolving on a world that constantly tried to kill you. Voxful mused, his scientific curiosity overtaking his usual administrative reserve. Exactly, Kira confirmed, helping another student adjust their balance. When every day is a fight for survival, you develop not just physical strength but mental resilience. And you learn quickly that surviving alone isn't enough. The group must survive. General Zarkesh moved closer, studying Kira with newfound interest. The Council has been debating the role of humans in galactic security operations. Some argue that your species is too aggressive, too unpredictable to entrust with such responsibility. Others suggest that those very traits make you ideal for certain, specialized functions. Kira bristled slightly at the implication. With respect, General, we're not just convenient biological weapons to be pointed at problems. Yes, we evolved on a high-gravity world with extreme conditions. Yes, that gives us certain advantages in crisis situations. But we're also scientists, artists, teachers, and diplomats. She gestured around the gymnasium at her students, who were now helping each other recover from the incident. What I'm teaching here isn't about how to be stronger or faster. It's about understanding your own unique biology and how to optimize it. It's about resilience, adaptation, and working with what you have. The general's skin rippled with patterns that suggested amusement. You misunderstand me, Specialist Donovan. I'm not here to recruit you as a weapon. I'm here because the Council needs to understand what humanity truly brings to the galactic community. Today, I've seen it firsthand. He turned to Administrator Voxthal. I'll be recommending an expansion of the Human Instructor Program to all Galactic Academy branches, and I'll be personally reviewing our integration policies regarding Earth. Voxthal's feeding tendrils twisted in surprise. That's unprecedented, General. As is watching a being voluntarily put themselves at risk to save others during a crisis. Zarkesh replied. Most species develop technology to protect themselves from danger. Humans, it seems, develop themselves. The general turned back to Kira. Continue your work, Specialist Donovan. It appears to be even more valuable than we realized. As the general departed, and the students began to recover from the emergency, Kira found herself surrounded by her class, their various appendages, tentacles, and sensory organs directed at her with new respect. How did you know exactly what to do? Milan, the slith, asked, her scales now a deep blue of admiration. I didn't, Kira admitted. I just knew I had to do something instead of nothing. That's another human trait. We hate feeling helpless. Klevik's mandibles clicked rapidly. You told us the first day that your body evolved to withstand impacts. Now we have seen it. You fell from the ceiling while holding General Zarkesh and didn't even seem injured. Kira rolled her shoulder, which was actually quite sore from the impact. I'll feel it tomorrow, she said with a smile. But yes, human bodies are designed to absorb shock. Our skeleton is internal for a reason. It allows our muscles and connective tissues to act as natural shock absorbers. Xandril's cloudy form pulsed with multicolored light. Then your exercises weren't just about making us stronger. They were about making us more adaptable. Exactly, Kira confirmed. Strength is useful, but adaptability is essential. The universe will always throw unexpected challenges at us. The question isn't whether you're strong enough to overcome them, but whether you're adaptable enough to find a solution. As the class slowly returned to order and the emergency response teams arrived to check the gymnasium for structural damage, Kira reflected on the general's words. Humans weren't just soldiers or workers or diplomats. They were, at their core, problem solvers. They saw obstacles not as walls, but as puzzles to be decoded. And perhaps that was their true value to the galactic community, not their physical capabilities, but their relentless determination to find a way through, around, or over any challenge. A determination born from evolving on a world that had taught them an essential lesson. Survival isn't guaranteed. It's earned through adaptation, innovation, and cooperation. Administrator Voxthal approached her again as the emergency crews finished their assessment. Engineering says the gravity system is stable now. Classes can resume tomorrow. Kira nodded. Good. We were just getting to the interesting part of today's lesson. Voxthal's eye membranes fluttered in what Kira had come to recognize as his version of a smile. I believe, Specialist Donovan, that the lesson continued despite the interruption. Perhaps it was even enhanced by it. Looking at her students, who were now eagerly discussing their experiences during the gravity failure and comparing notes on what had worked best, Kira had to agree. Sometimes the most valuable lessons came not from planned curriculum but from life itself, especially when that life threw you into zero gravity without warning. Tomorrow, she decided, we'll discuss how each of you responded today, what worked, and what could be improved. Real experience is the best teacher. Indeed, Voxthal agreed, though perhaps with less dramatic examples in the future. Kira laughed, a sound that no longer made her students flinch, but instead drew them closer, curious, and engaged. No promises, Administrator. After all, I'm from Earth. We specialize in the dramatic. The strength within. The Interstellar Adaptive Athletics Competition. Kira read from the holographic notice that Administrator Voxthal had just shared with her. And you want our class to participate. 2 months had passed since the gravity malfunction incident. In that time, Kira's reputation had spread throughout the Galactic Fitness Academy and beyond. Her class was now at maximum capacity, with a waiting list of students from across the station eager to learn from the human instructor. Voxthal's feeding tendrils rippled with what Kira had come to recognize as enthusiasm. The committee specifically requested your group. After General Zarkesh's report, there's significant interest in your teaching methodologies. Kira scanned the competition details. It was to be held on Centauri Station, a massive orbital platform designed specifically for interspecies events. Teams from academies and institutions across the galaxy would compete in challenges designed to test strength, endurance, agility, and problem-solving across multiple species-specific categories. This is in 2 weeks, Kira noted with concern. That's not much time to prepare. Which is why I've cleared your schedule of all other duties, Voxthal replied. This is a priority for the Academy. It's the first time a human instructor has led a team in the competition, and after the incident, he paused, his 8 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of significance among his species. Well, there are those who wish to see if your student's performance was a fluke or the result of your training. Kira understood the subtext. This wasn't just about the competition. It was about humanity's place in the galactic community. The gravity malfunction had demonstrated human physical capabilities, but doubts remained about whether such abilities could be effectively taught to other species. I'll need to select a team, Kira said, already mentally reviewing her students' strengths and weaknesses. The competition allows 12 participants, correct? Yes, from at least 6 different species classifications, Voxthal confirmed. The challenges are designed to require diverse biological adaptations working in concert. Kira nodded thoughtfully. I'll have a team roster by tomorrow. And I'll need access to the specialized training facilities in Section 7. Voxthal's eye membranes fluttered in surprise. The environmental simulation chambers. Those are typically reserved for advanced xenobiology research. Exactly, Kira smiled. I want to prepare my team for everything the competition might throw at them. Variable gravity, atmospheric composition changes, temperature fluctuations. If we're going to win this, we need to be adaptable in all conditions. Win. Voxthal sounded startled. The Academy has never placed higher than 7th in the 17 years of this competition. The Diraxian Combat College and Regelian Mobility Institute have dominated for the past decade. Kira's smile widened, showing just enough teeth to make Voxthal's feeding tendrils twitch nervously. Then it's time to shake things up. Administrator, we're not just going to compete. We're going to win. The next morning, Kira addressed her assembled class. I've selected 12 of you for the Interstellar Adaptive Athletics competition, she announced, projecting a holographic roster onto the wall. If your name is highlighted, please stay after class. The rest of you will continue with your regular curriculum under Assistant Instructor Paxilon. Murmurs of excitement rippled through the gymnasium as students checked the list. Kira had carefully chosen representatives who not only excelled physically, but also demonstrated the adaptability and problem-solving mindset she'd been cultivating. Klevik, the arachnoid student who had once struggled with basic balance, chittered excitedly when he saw his name. Beside him, Milan's scales flashed a brilliant gold of pride. Xandril pulsed with such bright light that nearby students had to shield their sensory organs. Zintera's crystalline form vibrated at a frequency that Kira had learned indicated joy. Other selections included Trevor, a massive gravidian whose silicon-based body could withstand extreme pressures, and Veri, a diminutive luminal whose bioluminescent cells could communicate complex information patterns, and Fleexa, an aquatic mer whose environment suit concealed remarkable flexibility and speed. When the regular class concluded and only the selected team remained, Kira's demeanor shifted from instructor to commander. Congratulations on your selection, she began, her voice carrying the crisp authority that betrayed her military background. But make no mistake, what comes next will be the most challenging experience of your academic careers. Trevor, the Gravidian, rumbled a question through his translator. Instructor, records indicate the Academy has never placed well in this competition. What makes you believe we can succeed? Kira smiled. Because you've been training differently. Most institutions focus on optimizing species-specific abilities, making the strong stronger, the fast faster. We've been working on something else entirely. She pointed to each team member in turn. Klevik, you've developed cross-line coordination that most arachnoids never achieve. Milan, your thermal adaptation rate has improved 300% since our first class. Xandril, you can now maintain solid state under pressures that would disperse most Vostigs. She continued around the circle, highlighting each student's progress in areas typically considered limitations for their species. You've all pushed beyond your biological predispositions. That's our advantage. Zintera's crystalline form refracted light in patterns of uncertainty. But instructor, the Diraxian team consists of beings evolved for combat. The Regelians can alter their cellular structure at will. How can we compete with such natural advantages? Kira approached the crystalline student. Let me ask you something, Zintera. When we had our first endurance training session, how long could you maintain peak energy output? 3 minutes and 22 seconds, Zintera replied precisely. And now, 17 minutes and 45 seconds. Kira nodded. At 500% improvement in 8 weeks. Did your crystalline structure fundamentally change in that time? No, Zintera admitted, facets glimmering thoughtfully. What changed was your belief about what was possible, Kira explained, addressing the entire team now. You discovered that your perceived limitations were largely self-imposed. That's a uniquely human concept we call breaking through the wall. She paced before them, her movements purposeful. In human athletics, there's a moment in endurance events when the body screams to stop. Everything hurts. Your lungs burn. Your muscles fail. We call it hitting the wall. Most beings stop there, believing they've reached their biological limit. Kira stopped, meeting the gaze, or sensory equivalent, of each team member. But humans discovered something important. The wall is largely mental. Push through it, and you find new reserves you never knew existed. That's what I've been teaching you, whether you realized it or not. In Very, the luminal, pulsed with blue-white light, their species' indication of an intellectual breakthrough. That's why you never allowed us to use biomonitors during training. You didn't want us to see our supposed limits. Exactly, Kira confirmed. Monitors tell you when you should be exhausted based on established parameters for your species. But those parameters were established by individuals who stopped at the wall. Fleexa, the aquatic mer, burbled through her translator. This concept is alien to us. In my world, exceeding established biological parameters is considered dangerous, potentially life-threatening. And sometimes it is, Kira acknowledged. I'm not suggesting recklessness, but there's a significant gap between true biological limits and perceived ones. Our training has been about finding that gap and exploiting it safely. For the next week, Kira subjected her team to specialized training in the environmental simulation chambers. They trained in variable gravity conditions, from near zero to twice galactic standard. They faced rapid temperature fluctuations that forced their bodies to adapt within seconds rather than minutes. They worked through atmospheric composition changes that challenged their various respiratory systems. Throughout it all, Kira pushed them harder than they'd ever been pushed before, but always with careful monitoring and precise knowledge of their true biological limits. She wasn't interested in breaking them. She wanted to show them how much they could bend without breaking. By the end of the week, exhaustion had settled over the team like a heavy shroud. Even Kira, with her Earth-evolved physiology, felt the strain of the intensive schedule. During a rare break, Milan approached her as she checked training data on her tablet. "Instructor," the serpentine slith began hesitantly, "the others wanted me to speak with you." Kira looked up, noting the dull green of Milan's scales, a sign of fatigue among her species. "What's on your mind?" Milan's scales rippled slightly, concerned that we may not be able to maintain this intensity until the competition. Some team members are experiencing symptoms approaching systemic failure. Kira set down her tablet. "I know exactly how hard I'm pushing each of you, Milan. It's by design. But, do you know what tapering is?" Kira interrupted gently. Milan's translator hesitated before rendering the unfamiliar concept. "It's not in our athletic lexicon. It's a human training technique," Kira explained. "You push athletes to their absolute limit, right to the edge of their capabilities, and then you drastically reduce training intensity just before competition. The body, having adapted to extreme stress, suddenly finds itself with abundant resources and time to recover." Understanding flickered across Milan's scales as they shifted toward blue. "A supercompensation effect." "Precisely," Kira smiled. "Tomorrow, we begin tapering. Light exercises, recovery protocols, and mental preparation only. By the time we reach Centauri Station, your bodies will have fully recovered, but the adaptations will remain. You'll be stronger, faster, and more resilient than you've ever been." The relief in Milan's posture was visible. "I'll inform the others." As promised, the next day marked a shift in training. Kira focused on recovery techniques, species-appropriate stretching, nutrition, and something many of the aliens found novel: visualization exercises. "Close your sensory organs," Kira instructed as the team sat in a circle, "or enter whatever state of sensory reduction is appropriate for your species." She guided them through detailed mental rehearsals of each competition event, encouraging them to imagine success in vivid detail, how it would feel, what they would perceive, how they would respond to challenges. The mind doesn't always distinguish between intensely imagined experiences and real ones, she explained. By rehearsing success mentally, you're creating neural pathways that make that success more likely in reality. Inver's bioluminescent patterns shifted skeptically. This seems unscientific. On the contrary, Kira replied. Human sports psychology has extensively documented the effectiveness of visualization. Our brains are prediction machines. They perform better when they've seen the task before, even if only in imagination. By the time the team boarded the transport vessel to Centauri Station, a transformation had occurred. The fatigue had vanished, replaced by an alert readiness. More significantly, Kira noticed a change in their collective demeanor, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. Centauri Station loomed before them, a massive structure spinning slowly to generate artificial gravity in its outer rings while maintaining zero-G conditions in its central hub. The competition arena occupied the transition zones, allowing for varied gravitational conditions that could be precisely manipulated for different events. As they docked and proceeded through decontamination, Kira noted the other teams arriving simultaneously. The Diraxian squad was impossible to miss. Massive quadrupedal beings with exoskeletons clearly evolved for combat, led by an instructor whose scars testified to decades of physical conflict. The Rigelians were equally distinctive, their amorphous bodies constantly shifting form even at rest, practicing transformations with casual ease. "Don't be intimidated," Kira murmured to her team as they passed these imposing competitors. "Remember what we discussed. Physical attributes aren't everything." Their assigned quarters were comfortable but utilitarian, designed to accommodate the varied environmental needs of multiple species. After allowing her team time to settle in, Kira called them together for a final briefing. "Tomorrow, the competition begins," she said simply. "You've prepared more thoroughly than any team in Academy history. But there's one more lesson I want to share, perhaps the most important one." The team gathered closer, their varied anatomies arranged in a loose circle around her. "Humans have a concept we call heart," Kira began. "It's difficult to translate precisely, because it's not about the physical organ. It refers to a quality of spirit, a combination of courage, determination, and will that transcends physical limitations." She looked at each team member in turn. In our history, there are countless examples of individuals who should have failed based on every objective measure, yet succeeded because they simply refused to give up. Athletes with inferior physical attributes who outperformed superior competitors. Explorers who survived impossible conditions. Ordinary people who lifted vehicles to save trapped children. Klevik's mandibles clicked questioningly. How is this possible? Physical laws can't be overcome by mere will. "It's not about breaking physical laws," Kira explained. "It's about accessing the full potential those laws allow. Most beings use only a fraction of their true capability. Under normal circumstances, this is actually beneficial. It prevents injury and conserves energy. But in extraordinary situations, these limitations can be temporarily overridden." She tapped her chest. "Humans call it heart because it feels like it comes from deep within. It's the voice that says, 'Keep going,' when everything else says stop. It's the strength that appears when all other strength is gone." Milan's scales shifted to a deep purple of contemplation. "Is this teachable, or is it unique to humans? I believe it exists in all sentient beings," Kira replied. "But like any quality, it must be recognized and cultivated. Tomorrow, when you face challenges that seem beyond your capabilities, remember, your true limits are far beyond what you imagine them to be." The morning of the competition arrived with the station's artificial daylight cycle. The arena was filled with spectators from across the galaxy, holographic displays showing close-ups of the competitors for those seated far from the action. Administrator Voxthal had traveled to support the team, his formal academic regalia marking him among the institutional representatives. More surprising was the presence of General Zarkesh, seated in the diplomatic section with other Security Council representatives. When he noticed Kira looking his way, he inclined his head in acknowledgement, his iridescent skin pulsing with patterns she couldn't interpret. The competition began with individual species-specific events designed to showcase each competitor's natural abilities. As expected, the Academy team performed well, but not exceptionally. They placed middle of the field in most categories, with a few notable exceptions where Kira's specialized training had given them an edge. By midday, when the team events began, they stood in 6th place overall. Respectable, but not threatening the Duraxian or Rigelian dominance at the top of the leaderboard. The first team event was the Adaptive Obstacle Course, a challenge where teams navigated a complex environment that changed its properties without warning. Gravity would shift, temperatures would fluctuate, and atmospheric composition would alter unexpectedly. "This is what we trained for," Kira reminded her team as they prepared at the starting line. "When the conditions change, don't fight it. Flow with it. Adapt." The starting signal pulsed, and the team surged forward. Immediately, the Duraxians took the lead, their powerful limbs propelling them through the initial low-gravity section with practiced ease. The Rigelians followed closely, their amorphous bodies reforming to optimize movement through each obstacle. The Academy team moved with coordinated precision, each member adapting to the changing conditions just as they had practiced. When gravity increased suddenly, Trevor, the Gravidian, took point, his silicon-based body barely affected by the crushing force. When oxygen levels dropped precipitously, Xandril expanded to capture and process atmospheric gases, sharing processed oxygen with teammates through specialized conduits they had developed during training. Halfway through the course, the unexpected happened. A section of the floor dematerialized, revealing a pool of highly corrosive liquid that had not been in any of the course briefings. Several teams faltered, their rehearsed strategies suddenly obsolete. "Improvise," Kira called from the sidelines. "Use what you have." Without hesitation, Zintera moved forward, her crystalline body resistant to the corrosive effects. She extended her structure, creating a bridge that spanned the hazard. The rest of the team moved across her extended form, careful to distribute their weight as they had practiced in training. The crowd erupted in surprised applause at this display of teamwork and quick thinking. Even more impressive was what happened next. Instead of leaving Zintera behind, Klevik extended his strongest silk lines, and the team worked together to pull their crystalline teammate across the gap after they had crossed. "They're adapting to the adaptations," the announcers voiced boomed. "The Academy team is showing remarkable synergy between radically different physiologies." By the final stretch, the Academy team had closed the gap with the leaders. The Duraxians still led, but their advantage had narrowed considerably. The course's final challenge was a vertical climb through alternating bands of freezing and superheated atmosphere. The Duraxians faltered here, their exoskeletons contracting painfully in the rapid temperature changes. The Rigelians maintained their progress, but slowed significantly as they constantly had to reform their cellular structures. The Academy team, however, moved steadily upward. Milan, whose thermal regulation Kira had specifically trained, led the way, her scales shifting rapidly to radiate or conserve heat as needed. The others followed in her wake, using her path to minimize their exposure to the temperature extremes. As they approached the summit, the Rigelian team caught up, now neck and neck with Academy. The final meters would determine the winner. Kira watched intensely from below, her fists clenched. "Remember your heart," she shouted up to them. "Find it now." Whether they heard her words or simply embodied their meaning, the Academy team found a final surge of energy. In Vari, the luminal, pulsed with unprecedented brightness, the photonic energy providing a boost to the biophotosynthetic members of the team. Fleexa, the Mer, released a specialized enzyme from her aquatic suit that temporarily enhanced oxygen transport efficiency in her nearby teammates. They crested the summit together, as a unit, finishing 3 seconds ahead of the Rigelians and 12 ahead of the Duraxians. The arena erupted in shocked applause. The Academy team, never before even a contender, had won the most technically challenging event of the competition. As they descended and regrouped at the staging area, Kira met them with undisguised pride. That, she said simply, was hard. Exhausted but exhilarated, the team moved through the remaining events with newfound confidence. They placed second in Environmental Adaptation Challenge, third in the Cooperative Weight Transfer, and first again in the Synchronous Movement Competition. By the final event, the Endurance Relay, they had moved into second place overall, just 4 points behind a perennial champion Duraxians. The relay was brutal by design. Each team member had to complete a circuit in conditions specifically challenging for their species. For most teams, this meant allowing their stronger members to build a lead that their weaker members could afford to lose. Kira had a different strategy. "We're not going to play to your strengths," she told her team as they huddled before the event. "We're going to redefine your weaknesses." She had arranged their order so that each member would face their most difficult challenge. Xandril would traverse high-pressure zones that threatened to compress their gaseous form permanently. Zintera would face sonic disruption fields that could shatter her crystalline structure. Klevik would navigate sections of intense radiation that typically caused neurological disorientation in arachnoids. "Remember your training," Kira reminded them. "The wall is mental before it's physical. Push through it." The relay began, and as expected, the Duraxians took an early lead, their naturally martial physiology well-suited to the extreme conditions. The Academy team held steady in the middle of the pack, neither gaining nor losing significant ground through the first third of the relay. Then something remarkable began to happen. While other teams showed predictable deterioration as their less-suited members took their turns, the Academy team maintained their pace. Each member, facing their supposed biological weakness, performed not just adequately but exceptionally. In Veri, traversing a dark section that should have dampened their bioluminescent capabilities, instead pulsed with internal light that seemed to come from a deeper source than their photonic cells. Trevor, in a low-density section that typically left Gravidians unbalanced and disoriented, moved with a grace that belied his massive silicon form. By the final leg, the Academy team had moved into third place, within striking distance of the leaders. Milan, the Slith, would anchor their relay, facing a cold zone that should have rendered her ectothermic body sluggish and unresponsive. As she took the handoff and slithered into the cold chamber, Kira could see her scales already darkening to absorb any available heat. But unlike the other cold-vulnerable competitors, Milan didn't slow. If anything, her pace increased, her sinuous form undulating with power that shouldn't have been possible at such temperatures. "She's found her heart," Kira whispered as Milan overtook the Rigelian anchor and closed on the Duraxian leader. The final straightaway became a test of will more than biology. The Duraxian competitor, a veteran of many competitions, sensed the threat and pushed to his limit. Milan, her body operating far beyond normal parameters for her species, matched him meter for meter. They crossed the finish line so close that the sensors needed a moment to determine the result. When the holographic display finally updated, the crowd fell silent in disbelief before erupting in thunderous sound. The Academy team had won the relay by 0.02 of a second, and with that victory, they had secured the overall championship by a single point. As her team celebrated, exhausted but triumphant, Kira found herself approached by both Administrator Voxel and General Zarkesh. "Unprecedented," Voxel said, his feeding tendrils writhing with excitement. "In 17 years, no team from a non-specialized institution has ever won." General Zarkesh's iridescent skin pulsed with complex patterns. "More significantly, Specialist Donovan, your team won not by exploiting their natural advantages, but by transcending their natural limitations. This challenges our understanding of evolutionary determinism." Kira watched as her team was surrounded by admirers, representatives from other institutions already trying to learn their secrets. "It's not about denying biology, General. It's about understanding that biology is not destiny." The mind can drive the body beyond its usual parameters when properly trained. A very human perspective, Zarkesh noted, and apparently a transferable one. The award ceremony was conducted with all the pomp that galactic institutions could muster. As the Academy team stood on the highest platform, their varied anatomies arranged in a tableau of diversity, Kira felt a sense of accomplishment deeper than any she'd experienced in her military career. She had not simply taught these beings to be stronger or faster. She had taught them to believe in possibilities beyond their perceived limitations, perhaps the most human lesson of all. Later, as the team prepared for their return journey, Klevik approached Kira privately. The arachnoid's posture had changed dramatically since their first meeting. Confident now, balanced, his 8 limbs moving with coordinated precision. "Instructor," he began, mandibles clicking softly, "there is a question many of us wish to ask, but have hesitated to voice." Kira nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead." "This quality you call heart, this ability to transcend limitations through will, it seems to define your species. You speak of it as universal, but we have not observed it in our evolutionary histories." His upper limbs gestured expressively. "Is it possible that this quality is what allowed humans to survive on a world that should have killed you? That instead of strength producing survival, your survival demands produce strength?" Kira considered the question carefully. "I believe that's part of it, yes. Humans evolved in an environment that constantly challenged us. Those who adapted, who found reserves beyond their normal capacity, who refused to accept limitations, they survived and passed on those traits." Klevik's sensory bristles quivered thoughtfully. "Then perhaps what you have given us is not just a training methodology, but a new evolutionary path. You have shown us how to transcend our biological programming through consciousness and will." He lowered his front limbs in a gesture of profound respect. "On behalf of all your students, I thank you. You have not just taught us to win a competition. You have taught us to redefine what is possible." As their transport detached from Centauri Station and began its journey back to the Academy, Kira watched her team. No longer just students but champions, pioneers of a new understanding of physical potential. She had come to the Galactic Fitness Academy to teach aliens about human physical capabilities. Instead, she had taught them something far more important: the uniquely human belief that one's potential is limited not by biology, not by environment, not by circumstances, but ultimately only by will and imagination. And perhaps, she reflected as the stars streaked past the viewport, that was humanity's greatest strength after all. Not the bodies they had developed on their challenging homeworld, but the minds that refused to accept the impossible, that always sought a way forward, upward, beyond. The Deathworlder had not just showed them how to be stronger. She had showed them how to be more.